Let's now summarize the passage. One of the most prominent mathematical approaches to quantum gravity is loop. Okay, let me get the pen color right. Hold on one second. Yeah. So he says the quantum gravity or loop quantum gravity, which proposes that, so what is loop quantum gravity theory? The fabric of space and time is made of extremely small discrete chunks or loops. Space and time is made up of small discrete independent chunks called loops. A remarkable aspect of the quantum loop gravity is that it appears to eliminate time entirely. Space and time, but this quantum loop gravity appears, it seems as if it's totally not taking time into account. All right, interesting. A number of other approaches also seem to remove time as a fundamental aspect of reality. So you're talking of space and time. There is this quantum loop gravity theory which seems to ignore time altogether. There are other approaches also which don't give any importance to time as a fundamental aspect of reality. Done. Second paragraph. So we know we need a new physical theory to explain the universe, because so far the approach was space and time. Now suddenly we need a new approach to explain the universe. This theory might not feature time. Yes, these new approaches are not featuring time. So the new theory which explains the universe might not feature time. Might not. Suppose such a theory turns out to be correct. Now we've gone into the subjunctive mood. We've gone into the hypothetical mood. He says, suppose you have such a theory and such a theory turns out to be true. Would it follow that time doesn't exist? Does it mean that time doesn't exist? Because the theory is not using time, not giving any importance to time. Does it mean that time doesn't exist? It's complicated. So what's his answer to, does it mean that time doesn't exist? It's like one of your Facebook statuses on relationships. It's complicated. What does he mean by that? It depends on what you mean by exist. What do you mean by the term exist? Then I'll give you the answer whether time exists or not. This is what the author is saying. Interesting approach to a pure physics, pure science passage. Theories of physics don't include any tables, chairs, or people. Yet we still accept that tables, chairs, and people exist. Now, what does he say in the second paragraph? We now need a new physical theory because it's not using time. So now here we need a new physical theory which will explain the universe which might not feature time. Suppose such a theory turns out to be true. This is what the author is saying. Whole thing is hypothetical. He says, suppose you have a theory explaining the existence of the universe without taking time into account. Does that mean that time doesn't exist? So I give you a theory where he's not using time at all and he's explaining the universe. Author is asking you, does it mean that the concept of time doesn't exist? Then the author's argument. Now the whole argument is running on logic. He's saying it's complicated. The answer to this is complicated. It depends on what you mean by exist. Theories of physics don't include tables, chairs, or people. Yet we accept that tables, chairs, and people exist. So do you have any theory of physics which proves the existence of tables, chairs, or people? No. Does that mean tables, chairs, and people don't exist? They do, right? Then what is the author's answer? Why? Because we assume that such thing exists at a higher level than the level described by physics. Physics describes one level of existence. Tables, chairs, people exist at a higher level, whatever he means by it. We are not into what he means by it. We just read and understand. We say that tables, for example, emerge from an underlying physics of particles whizzing around the universe. All right, physics will explain those particles, but tables emerge from that underlying aspect of particles in the universe. And physics probably explains those underlying particles. Clear? All right, next. But while we have a pretty good sense of how a table might be made out of fundamental particles, we have no idea how time might be made out of something more fundamental. Okay, I can understand how tables are made, so we understand the existence of table, we take it for granted. But somewhere, understanding time in terms of being made out of more fundamental particles becomes a little difficult to understand. So unless we come up with a good account of how time emerges, we can explain how tables emerge. Unless we can explain how time emerges, it is not clear that we can simply assume that time exists. So we need to have some explanation about how time emerges. Until that, we can't just assume that time exists. Time might not exist at any level. The author says, given this argument, time might not exist at any level. Second, this paragraph is clear? All right. Next. Saying that time might not exist at any level is like saying that there are no tables at all. What do you mean? Time doesn't exist. I mean, we all take time so much. Time is such an integral part of our lives. The author explains that. Trying to get by in a world without tables might be tough, but managing in a world without time seems positively disastrous. Can you imagine life without time? You can probably imagine life without tables, but you can't imagine life without time. So he says our entire lives are built around time. We plan for the future in light of what we know about the past. We hold people morally accountable for their past actions with an eye to reprimanding them later on. We believe ourselves to be agents in part because we can act in a way that will bring about change in the future. So our whole life depends on the concept of time. Past, present, and what we do now as agents of the present for a foreseeable future. So he is saying we believe ourselves agents in part because we can plan and act in a way that we can make changes in the future. So life without time will be positively disastrous because it's such an integral part of our lives. The discovery that time does not exist would seem to bring the entire world to a grinding halt, right? Because your whole life is revolving around this concept and suddenly you say that there is no time, then the whole world will come to a standstill. We would have no reason to get out of bed. Next. So this is the hypothetical paragraph where he says, suppose there was no time, what would happen? Life without tables, you can imagine life without time, life will come to a grinding halt. You won't even get up from bed. Pointless. Then there is a way out of the mess. So he is saying, look, no. What's the way out? There is a solution to this problem. What is that? Physics might eliminate time. It seems to leave causation intact. Time physics is not giving importance to. That might happen, but it leaves this phenomenon called causation intact. What does he mean by that? The sense causation is the sense in which one thing can bring about another. That's causation. One thing causing another, bringing about another. That aspect is left alone by physics. That aspect exists. Physics is not ignoring it, not saying that it doesn't happen. Perhaps what physics is telling us is that causation and not time is the basic feature of our universe. So now you're getting to the author's main point. Starts by talking about time and space. Then he says this quantum loop gravity theory doesn't take time into account. Lot of new approaches don't take time into account. Does that mean time doesn't exist? Then he poses a hypothetical question. He asks you, we don't talk about tables in physics. We don't talk about people in physics. Does that mean people and tables don't exist? No. Why? Because we know that tables and people made of particles whizzing around the universe, he says. He says, then what about time? Right? Then he comes to the question. So we have to explain time somehow in terms of the particles that cause time to emerge. Otherwise, we wouldn't be understanding the concept of time. Then we would assume that time doesn't exist. And if time doesn't exist, our life will be pointless. Then he says, no. The solution to this is physics does not factor in time, but physics gives a lot of importance to a phenomenon called causation. Causation, the ability of something to bring about something, to cause something else to happen. He says, so basically physics is telling us causation and not time is the basic feature of our universe. So earlier physics used to think of time and space as the basic features of our universe. New theories seem to be telling us that it is causation, not time, that is the basic feature of the universe. If that's right, then the agency can still survive, for it's possible to reconstruct a sense of agency entirely in causal terms. Agency, our action of doing something, that can be justified in terms of causation. This suggests that time does not exist, may have no direct impact on our lives, even while it propels physics into a new era. So if you take this, if you accept this, then it can suggest that time doesn't play an important role. It doesn't have a direct impact on our lives, even though it propels physics into a new idea. Even while it propels physics into a new era. Clear? Question 2. We say that tables, for example, emerge from an underlying physics of particles whizzing around the universe. What is the purpose of this example? Whenever there's a question on why do you think this example has been given, what is the meaning of this example, what is the context of this example, always refer to the part of the passage where it has been used, no matter how sure you're of the answer. I know we summarized it and we know what it means, but always go back, cross-check. It doesn't take you much time to cross-check. So where is it? And in the exam, the passage is right in front of you for every question. So what did he say? He says that physics, the question on existence of time. He says just because theories of physics do not tell you about time, does that mean time doesn't exist? Then he says it's complicated. It depends on what you mean by exist. Theories of physics don't include tables, chairs, or people, and yet we accept that they exist because we assume that such thing exists at a higher level than the level described by physics. But with tables, we can say they emerge from an underlying physics of particles whizzing around the universe. But with time, we don't have any such explanation on how time emerges. Correct? This is the context in which he used the example. Now let's look at the question. The question says, what is the purpose of this example? Purpose is to tell you that emergent time also needs an explanation like that. And science doesn't have any such explanation about how time emerges. Something like that. We can imagine how a table might be made out of more fundamental particles, but we cannot imagine the concept of emergent time. And until somebody explains the concept of emergent time, we cannot assume that time exists. Correct? So that's the answer. That is what he means. That is the purpose, to tell you that this is the meaning. Let's quickly look at B, C, and D. Just like tables, we can explain how time is made out of fundamental particles. He tells you we can explain tables, but we can't explain time. That's what the passage is saying. He doesn't say it can be explained. So B contradicts the statements in the passage. The entire underlying physics of particles whizzing around the universe is unscientific. He doesn't say that. He just tells you how tables are explained. He doesn't say it's wrong. He doesn't say it's unscientific. In fact, he accepts that. So C is wrong. Time and tables are different yet alike in that both emerge from more fundamental particles. Tables, we all accept. Time, author is saying nobody has given a convincing example. So D is also wrong. Therefore, my answer is A. Hope you got that right.